This child was literally fell to death. The Adams County Social Services Department in this case can ordinarily, I mean, they just paid a $6.7 million judgment because of their malfeasance. It wasn't negligence. It was because of their malfeasance in a case involving adoptive children. This case isn't simply negligence. This case isn't simply a situation where somebody slipped up. This is a case where the ongoing workers, their supervisors, and the Adams County Social Services Department was directly, causally responsible for the death of this child. And quite candidly, they're worried about their civil liability. Frankly, I think somebody should be taking them in front of a grand jury and trying to find out whether or not their conduct was reckless enough to merit a criminal prosecution. It was that serious. I had to review the social services files as part of the pretrial proceedings. The overwhelming majority of the information in those files was irrelevant to these proceedings. However, I had the opportunity to review the course of supervision of this family. These children were virtually out of the home in the custody of the Social Services Department from the time of their birth, both children. The court notes that the child's older brother was 3 years old and still nonverbal, completely incapable of speaking. I'm so angry about the level of supervision in this case. It's incomprehensible to the court how things could have evolved in this case. Knowing the history, I reviewed 18 inches of social services records. There was a history of neglect and chaos and lack of structure involving these children that had gone on from their birth. Their mother had never provided any structure. Neither child's father had ever been involved in their life. There were red flags all over these files for a period of 3 years. 3 years. And I've seen bad cases, and I've seen bad supervision. I've had to intervene as a judge to prevent it because social workers were disingenuous in court, oftentimes based upon the direction of their supervisors. This case is appalling. Independent of the level of or lack of supervision, lack of insight, lack of oversight, lack of comprehension, lack of competency that led to the return of the children to their mother, the court notes it is aggravated by the fact that 3 days before Michael Harris was killed, his older brother had a clearly suspicious and non-accidental injury behind the right ear on the back of his head. This was not documented in notes, although it was documented in the workers' notes. It was photographed and documented. And yet Michael Harris never underwent any type of a physical examination. What's appalling about this is that the Adams County Social Services Department has repeatedly ballyhooed through their public relations department their relationship with the Camp Center and with the Children's Hospital and the Anschutz Medical Facility, and their ability to have children examined, to have children inspected, to make sure that child abuse is prevented and children are appropriately cared for. They have an ongoing relationship with a medical facility. This is nothing that would have required any significant amount of insight or probably more than about 2 seconds of thought. With that relationship in mind, with a family that has an extensive abusive and neglectful history with a mother who had violated court orders. And the court notes she was ordered not to have her parents have contact with these children because of their history, first of drug abuse, secondly because of their history with the Department of Social Services and that they were a clear and present danger to the children. She had the maternal grandparents care for these children in violation of an express order of court, and there was nothing in the file that indicated that at any point an unannounced visit to the purported provider for daycare had ever been made, even though that was a family member. And as a consequence, there was absolutely no supervision. There was absolutely no checking. President Reagan once said, we should trust but verify. And that's always been something that's become almost trite in terms of our societal discourse. There are certain cases you don't trust and verify. That's this case. The court notes that because of the lack of verification, they never, and they being the Adams County Social Services Department, never checked on what was going on with somebody they knew was deceitful, they knew had been previously neglectful, they knew had placed the children at risk. They did nothing to further examine what was going on. Moreover, after the children were returned, when all of the information is in the first 60 days of reunification is the most stressful period of time for a family. It's stressful for the parent. There are demands regarding employment, regarding treatment, transportation, housing. All of those issues were present in this case, every single one of them. Ms. Key, the child's mother, was marginal in terms of her employability. She had extraordinary difficulties financially, which is one of the reasons that she was cohabiting with Mr. Scarlett intermittently. And the court notes that he wasn't investigated at all. The court notes that despite those factors, all of which are clear red flags regarding the potential for future abuse, they were disregarded, the children were returned to her, and when clear evidence of abuse was shown on a nonverbal 3-year-old child who couldn't even say what an ordinary 3-year-old child would say, they did nothing to examine his sibling. Nothing. And the evidence at trial disclosed there were numerous injuries on Michael Harris, on his head, his torso, other parts of his body, that were older than that 3-day window. The iron testing established that. Had they taken this child to a qualified medical provider, utilizing their authority under the emergency protective provisions of Colorado law, to their partner, who they want to use for public relations purposes, but obviously not for medical treatment, this case would have never happened. Never happened. Because the injuries to Michael Harris would have been palpable. The non-lethal, non-life-threatening injuries would have been palpable. And whether Mr. Scarlett was responsible for those injuries or Ms. Key was responsible for those injuries, this would have been a county court child abuse case, not a first-degree murder prosecution. It's appalling, the level of neglect, not by the mother, which is appalling, but by the state charged with the care and protection of a child. It's ridiculous. It transcends the boundaries of human decency, irrespective of the bureaucratic ability to hide behind privacy laws, to hide behind privilege, to make no statements, to try and cover their tracks knowing the press is going to go away. The stories don't have legs for 5 years. Judges get rotated out of divisions, and so you can come in with a new judge and give him the smiley face and convince him that you're doing your job. That administrative reviews take years and years and years. And children die, but bureaucrats still have their jobs. That's the way it works. That's the way the system in this state is set up. Michael Harris never had a chance in life. As a system, we had an obligation to give him a chance in life, and our system failed. It is appalling.